Welcome to Pages from History, where the greatest stories of humanity come alive before your eyes. Today we embark on an extraordinary journey through 6 centuries of Ottoman magnificence and power. I invite you to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us in exploring one of history's most influential empires. Stay with us until the end as we unveil the complete saga of the Ottoman Empire's rise, glory, and transformation. First, the dawn of empire. In the rugged highlands of northwestern Anatolia, where mountain winds whispered tales of conquest and destiny beckoned, a small warrior tribe prepared for greatness. The year was 1299, and Osman I stood before his people, his weathered face reflecting determination that would birth an empire. The Byzantine watchtowers dotted the horizon like silent sentinels, their stones bearing witness to centuries of Greek and Roman glory. Yet beneath those ancient fortifications, a new power stirred, gathering strength like storm clouds before thunder breaks the sky. Osman's warriors wore simple leather armor and carried curved swords that gleamed in the Anatolian sun, their eyes burning with purpose. They were Ghazis, frontier fighters who saw themselves as champions of faith, ready to carve destiny from the chaos of a fragmenting world. The small settlement of Suut served as their humble capital, its wooden structures and modest mosque contrasting sharply with Byzantine stone magnificence. Here, women ground grain in millstones, while children played in dusty streets, unaware they belonged to a people destined to rule continents. When Osman's forces first clashed with Byzantine troops near Beylik, the clash of steel echoed through valleys that had known peace for generations. The Byzantine soldiers, armored in chainmail and carrying painted shields, fought with the discipline of an ancient empire refusing to acknowledge its twilight. Yet the Ottoman warriors moved with fluid grace, their cavalry tactics honed by generations of nomadic warfare on the Central Asian steppes. They encircled their enemies like wolves surrounding prey, using terrain and speed where the Byzantines relied on formation and tradition. Victory came not in a single glorious battle, but through persistent pressure, like water wearing away stone over countless years. Village by village, fortress by fortress, the Ottoman beylik expanded, absorbing Greek peasants who found the new rulers more just than absent Byzantine lords. Osman instituted a radical policy that would define Ottoman success for centuries, welcoming skilled craftsmen and administrators regardless of their faith. In Ottoman camps, Greek engineers worked alongside Turkish warriors. Armenian merchants traded beside Arab scholars, creating a mosaic of human talent and ambition. As Osman aged, his son Orhan stood ready to continue the conquest, his tall frame wrapped in robes of increasing sophistication and power. The simple tribal chief's tent was giving way to a proper court, where scribes recorded decrees and ambassadors from neighboring states arrived with gifts and fearful respect. Second, conquest and expansion. The walls of Bursa rose from the hillside like a crown of stone, its markets filled with silk merchants and its streets echoing with a dozen languages. In 1326, after a siege that tested Ottoman patience and resolve, the city fell, becoming the first true capital of the growing empire. Orhan transformed the captured Byzantine city into an Ottoman showcase, converting churches into mosques while preserving the intricate mosaics that adorned their walls. Greek architects worked with Turkish planners to create public baths, covered markets, and theological schools that blended architectural traditions into something entirely new. The Ottoman army evolved from tribal raiders into a professional force, with Orhan establishing the first standing infantry units that would later become legendary. Young Christian boys from Balkan villages were recruited through the Devshirme system, converted to Islam, and trained in palatial barracks to become elite janissaries. These soldiers wore distinctive white felt caps and carried matchlock muskets that roared like thunder, their discipline making them feared across continents. They lived in barracks decorated with calligraphy and geometric patterns, spending their days in weapons training and their nights studying military treatises and the Quran. In 1354, an earthquake shattered the walls of Gallipoli, and Ottoman forces poured through the breached fortifications like floodwater through a broken dam. This foothold in Europe opened the Balkans to Ottoman expansion, where Slavic kingdoms fragmented by internal strife fell like dominoes before the advancing crescent banners. Serbian knights in plate armor charged across muddy fields at Kosovo in 1389, their horses' hooves churning earth where destiny would be decided. Sultan Murad I watched from his command tent, its silk walls embroidered with verses praising God and victory, as his army deployed in formations perfected through decades of warfare. The battle raged from dawn until the sun hung low, painting the sky crimson as if nature itself mourned the thousands who fell that day. Though Murad died from an assassin's blade, Ottoman victory was complete, and the Balkans would remain under the crescent for 5 centuries. Bayezid Vifens, called the Thunderbolt for the speed of his conquests, pushed the empire's borders to the Danube River and deep into Anatolia. His court in Edirne glittered with captured treasures, where Byzantine princesses served alongside Turkish nobles and Latin scholars debated with Muslim theologians in marble halls. Yet pride comes before catastrophe, and in 1402, another thunderbolt struck when Timur the Lame's Mongol hordes descended from the east like an apocalypse. At Ankara, the Ottoman army shattered, Bayezid was captured and caged, and the empire teetered on the brink of dissolution as civil war consumed Osman's descendants. Third, Golden Age of Civilization. From the ashes of near destruction, Mehmed I rebuilt the empire with the patience of a master craftsman restoring a broken masterpiece. He traveled from city to city, settling disputes, confirming local governors, and slowly weaving the fractured territories back into a unified whole. His son, Murad II, continued the reconstruction, but it was young Mehmed II who possessed ambition that could not be contained by cautious consolidation. At 21, with a face both handsome and severe, Mehmed gazed across the Bosphorus at Constantinople's legendary walls and dreamed what others called impossible. For 53 days in 1453, the thunderous roar of massive cannons shook the foundations of the ancient city that had defied conquerors for a millennium. The walls that had stopped Attila the Hun and countless others cracked and crumbled under bombardment from cannons so large they required teams of oxen to move. Byzantine defenders, desperate and brave, repaired breaches by night while Greek fire burst across the waters, turning Ottoman ships into floating pyres. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine X walked the walls in purple robes, knowing death approached but refusing to abandon the city his ancestors had ruled since Rome's glory days. On May 29th, as dawn broke, Ottoman forces surged through a forgotten gate left unlocked in the chaos, and Constantinople fell at last. Mehmed entered the Hagia Sophia, his boots echoing in that vast space, and declared it a mosque while guaranteeing protection for the city's diverse populations. The city was renamed Istanbul, though many still called it Constantinople, and it became a capital worthy of an empire spanning 3 continents. Architects from Persia and Italy labored side by side, creating mosques with soaring domes that seemed to float on light, their minarets piercing the sky like prayers made stone. The Grand Bazaar grew into a labyrinth of commerce where merchants from Venice bargained with traders from Damascus, and the scent of spices mingled with perfumes from Arabia. In the streets, you could hear Turkish, Greek, Armenian, Arabic, Hebrew, and Italian, a symphony of languages that reflected the empire's cosmopolitan character. Suleiman the Magnificent ascended the throne in 1520, and under his reign, the empire reached its zenith of power and cultural achievement. His royal robes shimmered with gold thread and precious stones, and his turban bore a jeweled egret worth more than most European kingdoms' annual revenues. The Ottoman navy dominated the Mediterranean, its galleys with their distinctive curved prows striking fear into Spanish and Venetian fleets alike. Admiral Barbarossa commanded these waters like Neptune himself, his flagship adorned with captured enemy banners and crewed by sailors from a dozen nations. In Vienna, the gates held against Ottoman siege in 1529, but the mere appearance of Turkish armies before those walls sent shockwaves through Christian Europe. The janissaries' camps outside the city walls were like mobile cities themselves, with markets, bathhouses, and even traveling theaters entertaining the troops. Suleiman's legal reforms earned him the title lawgiver among his own people, as he codified laws that governed everything from taxation to criminal justice. In courts throughout the empire, qadis rendered judgments based on these laws, attempting to balance Islamic principles with practical governance of a multi-faith empire. Fourth, power and transformation. The Topkapi Palace became the nerve center of an empire that stretched from Budapest to Baghdad, its countless rooms holding the weight of administrative power. Within the harem, veiled women wielded influence that could make or break viziers, their political acumen often exceeding that of many male officials. The valid sultan, the sultan's mother, occupied apartments rivaling those of the sultan himself, her word carrying authority that even grand viziers respected. These women were rarely Turkish by birth, often coming from Christian families as slaves, yet rising through intelligence and determination to shape imperial policy. Selim II, called the Sot for his fondness for wine, nevertheless presided over continued expansion as Ottoman forces captured Cyprus from Venice in 1571. The island's fortresses, built by Crusaders and Venetians, fell one by one despite desperate resistance, their defenders knowing Ottoman victory meant slavery or death. Yet at Lepanto that same year, the Ottoman navy suffered its first major defeat, as Christian galleys shattered the Turkish fleet in a battle that turned waters red. The smell of gunpowder and blood hung over the Mediterranean, and though the Ottomans rebuilt their navy within a year, the myth of Ottoman invincibility was broken. The empire's administrative system evolved into a sophisticated bureaucracy where trained officials rather than military commanders increasingly dominated governance. In the Sublime Porte, the Grand Vizier's office, petitions from across the empire were received, deliberated, and answered with decrees sealed with the Sultan's tagra. Coffee houses appeared in every major city, where men in flowing robes and turbans debated philosophy, politics, and poetry while sipping the bitter brew. These establishments, decorated with tilework and furnished with low cushions, became centers of intellectual exchange that authorities viewed with alternating tolerance and suspicion. The millet system allowed religious communities to govern their own internal affairs, with Orthodox patriarchs, Armenian bishops, and Jewish rabbis administering their flocks. This pragmatic tolerance ensured stability, but also created parallel societies that would later challenge the empire's unity when nationalism swept through Europe. Ottoman art flourished, with miniature paintings depicting court life in exquisite detail and calligraphers transforming Arabic script into visual poetry that adorned mosques and manuscripts. The blue tiles of Iznik covered mosque walls in floral patterns so intricate they seemed to bloom from the walls themselves, their colors vibrant even after centuries. Military technology evolved as European enemies adopted more effective gunpowder weapons and drilling techniques that challenged traditional Ottoman tactics. The janissaries, once the empire's greatest military asset, became a conservative political force, resisting modernization and using their power to make and unmake sultans. Fifth, legacy and decline. The 18th century brought wars that revealed Ottoman military decline, as treaties ceded territories that had been held for generations. After defeats by Russia and Austria, diplomats in Istanbul watched helplessly as European powers carved away Balkan provinces and Crimean territories. Selim III attempted comprehensive military reforms, creating new European-style units called Nizami Sedid, their uniforms and tactics modeled on Prussian armies. These soldiers drilled in formations their fathers would have mocked, firing in volleys rather than individual displays of martial prowess. The janissaries, threatened by these reforms, revolted in 1807, their riot turning Istanbul's streets into battlefields where blood flowed in ancient gutters. Selim was deposed and eventually murdered, his reforms dismantled by men who could not see that refusing change guaranteed extinction. Mahmud II succeeded where Selim failed, destroying the Janissary Corps in 1826 after they rebelled once too often, their barracks burned, and survivors hunted through the city. The morning after the massacre, silence hung over Istanbul like a shroud, broken only by the crackling of flames consuming what had been the empire's pride. Greek independence in 1830 tore away territories that had been Ottoman for 4 centuries, while nationalist movements stirred among Serbs, Bulgarians, and Armenians. In Balkan villages, secret societies met in cellars and forests, planning insurrections while Ottoman officials drank coffee in provincial capitals, unaware of gathering storms. The Tanzimat reforms of 1839 attempted to modernize administration and law, guaranteeing equality before the law regardless of religion or ethnicity. In newly established secular courts, judges in European-style robes replaced traditional qadis, though traditional Islamic courts continued operating in parallel. Railways connected Istanbul to Vienna and Baghdad. Telegraph lines carried messages at the speed of lightning, and steamships replaced the galleys that once ruled the Mediterranean. Yet modernization came too late and too slowly. always chasing European powers that had industrialized decades earlier and used their technological advantage mercilessly. The empire became the sick man of Europe, its finances controlled by foreign creditors and its territory parceled out in diplomatic conferences where Ottoman envoys watched helplessly. Sultan Abdulhamid II ruled from Yildiz Palace, isolated and paranoid, using spies and censorship to maintain control over an empire fragmenting despite his desperate efforts. When the 20th century arrived, the Ottoman Empire had survived for 6 centuries, yet its end approached inexorably like sunset after a long day. The First World War would be its death blow, but its legacy endured in the memories of peoples across 3 continents who still carried Ottoman influences in their languages, customs, and architecture. The Ottoman Empire's 6th-century journey from a small Anatolian principality to a world power demonstrates how vision, adaptability, and tolerance can build civilizations. Its legacy lives in magnificent architecture, rich cultural traditions, and the genetic and cultural heritage of millions across the Middle East, North Africa, and the Balkans. If you enjoyed this journey through Ottoman history, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to Pages from History for more captivating documentaries that bring the past to life with depth, authenticity, and cinematic storytelling that honors the complexity of human civilization.